To come back to what was said about the situation of radical left in France and regarding also European Union. About first the problem, the phenomenon of massive abstention in elections has two reasons. For me, I think. The first reason is that the collapse of Soviet Union made discouragement of the people. The media, the domination actually of the media is very powerful, and they operate to discourage the people, saying that there is no way of alternative. And the second reason is that the development of technology, what they call the scientific revolution, is also creating an ideology of technicity, of speciality, and also that politics would be a profession of specialists, and we must give confidence to those knowing politics. And then elections were the way to give the power to politicians. And the people felt either we are not competent, we are not able to do anything, elections are unuseful. All that made this phenomenon of abstention. And there was really a decline of the Communist Party and now a revival. Why? Because in a period they played this situation and entered the system, saying to the people, yes, show what we shall do for you. And they were discredited as the others. And now the radical and mainly the Communist Party regrew. Why? Because they did not say this time, show what we shall see for you or do for you, but take the power. And we are here to help you to take the power. And it was a regrowing. It is the first. The second is about Europe. There will be an implosion of Europe. It cannot be otherwise. Because this Europe is an Europe against the sovereignty of the people. And we must not confuse nationalism and national sovereignty. Nationalism is closing the people in chauvinism, one against the other and so on. National sovereignty is cooperation between people having their full enjoyment of their self-determination. This European system deprives the peoples of self-determination. So, of course, it will improve. And it does not mean that we are against any form of cooperation. There is ALBA. Why could we not have in Europe an European ALBA? But ALBA is not a European Union. European Union in the top, oppressing the peoples for private interests, and ALBA is the cooperation of people for their own interest. This is the alternative. And the explosion of the Union European will be to let the place to the form of ALBA. Now, last observation about the sovereignty of the people, about the French radical left. The significance is that one of the basic aspects of the program of the radical, not only of the radical left, Communist Party and other parties of the front of left, and also wider than that. It is the claim of a new constitution, the abolition of this actual constitution, and to come back by improving it to the French tradition of a republic where the president is nothing, not electing the president, but electing the parliament of the way of popular sovereignty. And this is a program claiming the Sixth Republic, to abolish the Sixth Republic. Thank you.
I would add, dear friends, one. Before the First World War, as you know, parties which were very strong, in Germany especially, and which referred to Marxism, which spoke of revolution, have participated finally to the imperialist war. And as you know, in 1920, a third international was founded on this basis. Those who did not accept the attitude of the former left parties and those who sustained the Soviet Revolution, they founded the Third International. I mean that we have seen yet in history, in French, the dégénérescence, the disease, and a sort of death of parties which were supposed to represent the interests of workers. Secondly, and quickly, I want to say here that maybe you know that in Europe in the 60s, the Italian and the French communist parties were very strong, as they were after the Second World War, as they began to be after this time. In '69 in France, at a presidential elections, the socialists who were in charge 15 years before, during the war in Algeria, who were for many other reasons totally discredited, obtained 5% of the votes. The communist candidate obtained 21%. And we began to construct a union of the left. Sometimes we had to invent the socialist allies in our areas, in our towns, in our universities. They did not exist. We were a party of militants. They were a party of senators, of elected people, with some workers, of course, still voting for them. 3, I would say that in '79, these strong communist parties had begun to abandon every reference to Marxism, Leninism. They began to criticize every day Soviet Union, to underline the effective problems they could find, as the right finds every day, in the real socialism. But in '79, 16 of the communist parties of Western Europe were present in their parliaments, national parliaments. In Italy, 201 deputies on 630, it means 1 per 3, was a communist deputy. In Cyprus, 25% of the deputies were communist. In Iceland, same thing. In France and in Portugal, 20%, etc. For after the turning point of the 80s, and it's very soon it will be the end because you have only 30 years to support, dear friends. At the turning point, to speak seriously, of the 80s, everything was changing. And I want to underline that this happened before the collapses of Soviet Union. Not after, before. If you see what happened in the 80s, at the beginning, 80, 81, 82, for example, the Portuguese and French deputies represent only 10% of their national parliament. In Italy, the communists were especially, mostly occupied to denounce the form part of a party. They said it was a too heavy structure, to discuss about electoral reforms, to denounce the mistakes or the crimes of real socialists, etc. They ran after the so-called left, left which has no skeleton, a left who has given this extraordinary example in France 2 years ago. The Socialist Party in 2010 thought that it could present a candidate to be a president of France who was the general director of the International Monetary Fund. This was the scandal. The scandal is not the stupid thing about sexual adventures of Strauss-Kahn. The scandal is that the so-called left thought that we, the real left, we could vote at the second ballot for such a candidate. Swimming in his private life and in his professional life in money. I won't say before my last point, please, that the disaster so was programmed in the 80s and in the 90s. The Communist Italian party decided to suicide. It abandoned his name. It abandoned all its principles. And in 5 years, from 87 to 82, he lost 4 million of electors. In 87, he had 10 million of electors, and he had only in '92, and its name has changed. He was a simple party of socialist democracy. Last point, and thank you for your patience. What happens with these great, or not so great, coalitions, electoral fronts, which are now in the air, in the atmosphere, in the fashion? A former minister of Mitterrand named Mélenchon, a man with a certain talent, a man rather brilliant, who approved the war in Libya, was put ahead. His name was put ahead, and behind him there were forces, real militants, mainly the communist ones. The principle was to hide the name and the fact of what remains of communism in France. It's significant that the media were not in love, but quite in love with this man, who said very, very positive things against racism, for example, who did a positive campaign, making the French real left proud for 1 or 2 months, proud of itself. The media said that this Mélenchon would gain maybe 23% of the voices, les intentions de vote. After the beautiful campaign he did, he obtained in April 2012 11%. He was 4th at the first ballot, behind François Hollande, the present president, the socialist candidate, behind Nicolas Sarkozy, candidate for the right, of course, former president, and behind, in third position, Marine Le Pen, the daughter of the boss, #1 of the extreme right, a former soldier in Algeria, who tortured, as I said, once time 2 or 3 days before. And that is known by every French voting for such a man or for his daughter. And I have finished saying that 1 month later, in June, when there were elections for deputies, the so-called Front de Gauche, the coalition with Mélenchon, lost 2 of its 4 million of electors. Its score, as we say, was under 7%. And everyone has this remembrance. It was a beautiful moment, but now there is nothing more. So I think that the essential is the constitution of parties, because the parties, you see them during the elections, but they remain the day after. Thank you.
저는 간단하게 4가지 말씀드리고 싶은데요. 저는 지금 통합진보당 당원이면서 당 내부의 혁신을 바라는 입장에 있습니다. 탈당하지 않는 이유가 뭐냐고 물어보는 사람들도 있는데 제가 생각하는 거는 탈당하지 않고 있는 이유는 이렇습니다. 통합진보당은 진보정당으로서의 그 맥을 잇고 있다고 생각합니다. 지난 56년 설립됐던 진보당 이후 수많은 진보정당이 창당했다가 사라지곤 했지만 여전히 그 맥을 잇고 있는데, 지금 현재 공안 탄압이 자행이 되면서 내부의 어떤 분열이라든가 또 혁신을 바라는 세력들 그리고 당원들 이들조차도 서로를 이제 갈라치게 하는 그런 모습들이 사실 보이고 있습니다. 사실 12월달 대선 대통령 선거에서 박근혜 지금 현 이명박 정권의 뒤를 잇는 박근혜로의 정권 창출을 위한 그들의 어떤 분열 공작 이런 것이 아닌가 이렇게 생각이 들고요. 그에 따라서 이 단결을 저해하고 분열을 획득하는 이거에 맞서는 것은 당연한 우리 진보 진영의 의무라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 이것이 우선이고요. 두 번째는 진보당 내에 분파 패권은 이미 이전부터 존재해 왔었습니다. 제가 2002년도에 민주노동당에 가입한 이후에 지금까지 당 활동을 해오면서 이 내부의 혁신을 위해서 지금껏 싸우지 않은 적은 한 번도 없었습니다. 패권 분파를 척결하기 위한 많은 당원들의 노력이 있었음에도 불구하고 왜 이렇게 지금까지 이어져 오고 있는가, 그것을 당에서 탈당한 이 많은 사람들이 왜 그렇게 할 수밖에 없었는가를 많이 남아있는 사람들 그리고 패권 분파를 부렸던 사람들을 많이 생각해 보았으면 좋겠다는 생각이 들고요. 그들이 이 어떤 혁신을 위한 그 길에 나서길 바라는 그런 마음이 있기 때문에 탈당하지 않고 있습니다. 두 번째는 당이 지금 현재 통합진보당이 있고 그리고 진보신당이 있고 새로이 창당하려고 하는 정당, 그러니까 새로운 진보정당, 이렇게 세 개가 있게 되는데, 대통령 선거에서 각자가 대선 후보를 내려고 합니다. 그러면 세 개의 어떤 진보 진영에서의 세 명의 후보가 있게 되는데, 그럼 결국 어떻게 되냐면 지금 박근혜에게 어부지를 줄 수 있다고 생각합니다. 지난 과거에 2010년에 지방선거에서 진보신당의 노회찬 후보가 끝까지 완주하면서 당시에 오세훈 시장으로 당선이 된 그런 경험이 있는데, 마찬가지 그러한 결과를 내올 수 있다고 생각을 합니다. 그렇기 때문에 노동자 민중 후보로의 단일 후보 추대는 중요할 수밖에 없다고 생각을 하고, 저는 그러기 위해서 세 명의 후보가 아닌 한 명의 노동자 민중 후보가 추대되는 그것이 옳기 때문에 그 한 방향으로 달려가야 된다고 생각을 합니다. 그리고 세 번째는 선거연대는 할 수 있지만 연립정권, 공동정권은 안 된다고 생각을 합니다. 아까 여러 이제 발표자 토론자분들이 이제 말씀을 하셨었는데, 그 중에서 특히 이제 정성희, 김장민, 김희식, 이성원, 한준혜 이러한 많은 발표 토론자들이 말씀하셨던 그런 부분에서 제가 생각하는 것은 기본 공감을 하면서도 우경투항주의적인 그런 오류 이런 부분들은 다시는 과거에 있었던 이런 것이 다시는 나타나지 않아야 된다고 생각을 합니다. 그리고 아니 그건 위험한 생각이기 때문에 특별히 경계해야 된다고 보고요. 그래서 진보 정치 세력과 개혁 정치 세력이 연대하는 그 길에, 그래서 노동자 민중 후보 추대의 그 후보와 그 다음에 개혁 진영의 후보가 하나의 어떤 야권 연대를 통해서 정권 창출 이루는 것은 우리 남코리아에서 상당히 중요한 대선에서의 과제라고 생각을 합니다. 아까 김장민 김장민 말씀하셨던 부분에서 저는 이제 상임위원장을 맡는다든가 하는 그런 부분에서 권력 분정한다든가 이런 부분에 대해서는 상당히 공감할 만한 그런 지점이라고 생각합니다. 예, 이상입니다.
그런 상황이면 다 알겠는데요. 그러다 보니까 오늘 토론이 과연 선거연합 또는 이 후보 단일화 문제 또는 이 정권 연합정부의 출연 이런 데에 대해서 초점이 맞춰진 것 같고요. 거기에 대해서 멀리 유럽에서 그리고 남미에서 오신 분들의 발표와 토론은 진보 정치 세력이 12월 대선을 맞이해서 어떤 고민을 해야 되는가 하는데 상당히 많은 도움을 줄 수 있는 그런 것이라고 생각이 됩니다. 그래서 저는 공동대표, 이 포럼을 주최한 공동대표 한 사람으로서 멀리 유럽에서 그리고 남미에서 와서 많은 말씀해 주신 그런 이 토론자 발표자 여러분께 감사의 말씀을 드리고요. 또 그 밖에도 이 자리에서 많은 의견을 주신 분들께 감사의 인사를 드립니다. 제가 맡았던 토론이 7시 반까지인데 시간이 거의 딱 맞는 것 같습니다. 이것으로 토론을 마치도록 하겠습니다. 고맙습니다.